My friend, my bro, my namesake, a guy that I can't imagine this journey without. Andy, you were our A&R guy for the beginning of our career, for the first few records, for, really just getting us off the ground and where we were going. And I wouldn't be here if if it wasn't for you. So welcome to my podcast, my friend Andy Ivey. Good to see you, my friend. I see some good little plaques back there, like I have back here in mine. Yeah, we got some of the same
Yeah,
ones.
there's
Yeah,
a few. There's a few. Yeah.
yeah,
I am, I appreciate what you say. And you and I go back a long, long way,
yeah, we do.
back into the truth days and way back when. And I think I get a little too much credit for you guys' success. I was just happy to be in the room. It's like the old Nashville joke.
Sure.
If you're in the room, you get a third, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so, when the song is written. And so I get that. I mean, we all put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it together, and I was just grateful. I was grateful to be a part of it.
Well, you were, I mean, I'm not going to say you were the fifth hymn, but you were close in those days because you were just around all the time. You help us make hard decisions. And, we talked about this on several of these episodes. If it weren't for you, we would have never recorded Where There's Faith because you
Well, that's
pushed for
that,
that
that's
song.
always a fun. That's always a fun story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, let's
you
start
know,
there. Let's start there with that song because, again, where would For Him be without that song? And we wouldn't have had that song if it wasn't for you.
well, that story then brings in a bunch of names that you and I both know and love. Billy Simon, to
Hmm.
start with, who is, he remains one of my favorite songwriters and just an interesting dude. uh, and Dan Keene, who at the time was at
Yep.
Meadowgreen Music, who,
Hmm.
if you spend any time in the '80s and '90s around the Christian music business, you got to know and love Dan Keene, who uh, just is one of the funniest human beings I've ever been around, and just a tremendous guy. But I remember sitting in my office at Benson, overlooking the river there,
Hmm.
and we were talking about this first For Him record. I was hitting the streets like I need songs. And of course, people were like, well, who is this group? And I don't even think we had a name at the time.
No, we didn't. Well, I want to talk. Okay, I know we want to talk about whether it's faith because I led you there, but you bring up something interesting about finding songs for this new group. I mean, what was the attitude at Benson? I mean, was there like, hey, we're really excited about these guys, or was it like, we signed another artist, let's try and find what was the heat around us when we kind of entered the scene in the late, I guess it would have been like late '89.
Oh, it was earlier. It was '88, if I
Oh,
remember correctly,
88.
wasn't it?
Wow. No, I mean, we recorded
Was
the
it '89?
record. No, we recorded the record in January of 90.
Okay,
So
all
we
right.
would have been starting the conversations of breaking away from Truth and signing that deal with you guys because Roger Breland went in and brokered the deal for us.
Yeah.
And I think he got a signing bonus or whatever, but it didn't go to us. It might
I
have. He might have gotten an advance, you know,
can't, I
that
can't,
that
I can't remember all of the contracts.
yeah.
I was tangentially connected to that, but that was, Lanny Cates and those guys in the legal
Hmm.
department,
Yeah.
for the most part, who Lanny has carved out an amazing career
Yeah, he
for
has.
himself since those days too, and is an awesome
Yeah.
guy. But I, I remember the first time I had a discussion. I think it was Dan Clary and myself, and I think Jerry Park was in
Hmm.
on that conversation.
Yeah, who was the
And
president of Benson at the time?
President Benson at the
Yeah.
time.
Uh-huh.
And, because I had been working with you guys in Truth. Um, and I just remember them saying, I don't remember who was the impetus for that conversation, whether it was Roger or Dan or whatever. I think everybody sort of knew you, Mark, Marty, and Kirk were probably nearing your end of your run with Truth.
Right.
And, um, I'd seen you guys play so many times already, and there was always that moment where you guys did your thing
Right.
musically on
Yeah.
stage, and there's magic there. And Dan saw it as well. And I was sort of new into A&R. I'd come out of the radio promotion marketing side of it, but it had a passion for the production. And people tell me, and I think it's probably true, that I had an ear for hits. I just did. I knew when I heard a song that this is a song that people would want to
Yeah.
hear. it would have some legs to
which
it.
is a I kind of which is a must have. I had a conversation with John Mays, and same kind of thing. You've got to have an ear for what is going to hit, not what is necessarily hitting now,
Yeah.
but what is going to be a hit, and fighting for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to
And
have
so
that. You
I
got to
had
have
a
that knower.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a history of that with Benson, and even probably goes back to my first year in Nashville after moving. I graduated from college and moved to Nashville. I had a tutorial because I worked for the Gaither Music Group, and it's like Gary McSpadden and Bill Gaither and Ron Griffin, and it's like I learned some stuff
Yeah.
that first year.
Man,
Uh,
Gary and Ron's name come up in almost every conversation.
well, I mean, both of them legendary.
Yeah.
Gary was one of the kindest human beings I've ever
Hmm.
and just loved him so much. Um, and I was that first year. I mean, we're going backwards from where there's faith, but that first year I was in Nashville. I'm in the room with Billy Smiley, Gershmal, uh, uh, Eddie Carswell. They were all
Oh, wow.
writers
Yeah.
at this place, right? And I'm Chaz Bosarge and just an untold number. And I'm like, I'm hearing what makes a great song, and understanding the building of a story. And so, I had a really good, I didn't learn anything about music, about that kind of music in college. I learned about commercial music really that first year. It was like having it was a paid internship is what it was. I
Yeah.
wasn't making any money, but I was learning a lot of stuff
Yeah.
and just loved it, had a passion for it. And then I came to Benson and had a pretty good run, um, hearing albums that have been recorded, going, that's a radio single. That one's not. That one has some potential, and demonstrated enough skill in that area to go, hey, maybe this guy might know a thing or two, right, and might have some potential.
Yeah.
And then I was also like, because I knew in the long run, I'd kind of figured it out. It's like, I don't know if I want to be in the marketing side my whole career. I think I really want to be the guy who helps create the product,
Yeah. Be on the
create the
creative side.
recordings,
Yeah.
build it. I wanted
Hmm.
to be part of that. And so, but to do that's like, well, I need some experience. And so that's how I hung around. That's how I met Don Cook. And that's
Oh,
how I
wow.
met Dave Clark. And that's how I met Keith Compton and all those guys. Cause I was hanging around in the publishing area. Work would be done. I'd be downstairs in the studio going, teach me something. I want to hear this.
Yeah.
And I learned about recording and I learned about production and I learned about all of that stuff and started, producing custom albums on, if I could talk a friend of mine into I knew wanted to make a record, I was like, well, let me help you. And then,
Yeah.
I would, God bless them, because some of it probably wasn't all that great, but I learned some things and I learned to bring in people who were way more talented than me to do it. And so I was just around great songs a lot, which brings us back to Dan Keene and the whole story of For Him. There was a lot of buzz about the talent of you four guys. I mean, we were just talking about it. And remember the search of a name. That was a whole, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've told that story on this
Oh, yeah.
podcast before. That
Yep.
was
Go back and
that was
listen. Yeah. Go
interesting.
back and listen to the For Him podcast. It
Yeah,
definitely,
exactly.
we definitely spent some
Um,
time on that.
yeah, I did listen to that. And
Yeah.
but so I'm calling publishers at this point. It was the Christian music business was a small world. I knew all the publishers. They all knew me. They knew that I was sort of a gateway for songs to get on recordings. And but with any new artist, it's always hard to get a publisher to give you a song that they really think could be huge.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to say this. I mean, what Dan told me, and no big deal. I'm not name dropping here, but that song had been on hold for Amy Grant,
Wow.
and she just didn't, it had been on hold, and then Amy didn't record it.
Yeah.
It's,
And because,
everybody's
and
pitching a
well,
million
yeah.
songs to
And,
Amy.
and she would have taken a hard look at it because, um, Billy had written a couple of big songs for her as well.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So
so it wasn't
there was
like
a
it was
history.
a yeah, it wasn't just some guy coming up, and an unknown writer handing their song.
And Billy always made great demos of his songs.
Oh
He just
yeah,
at his home,
it
he'd
was
do
so
it.
fun. Yeah, it was so fun getting Billy's demos because first of all, his voice was so quirky that it sold the most outrageous lyrical content and just the crazy places the song would go. You were like, this song is weird, but I really love his quirky voice on it, and I wonder what we could do with this song.
Well, there's a cassette tape in the room behind me right here that all the songs that, well, not all the songs, but a lot of songs that Billy and Wayne Kirkpatrick wrote and
Yeah,
recorded together
Run Amok.
called Run Amok.
Yep.
I still have it. I will not get rid of it
Yeah.
because there are some diamonds in
Yeah.
there that no one has
Wayne.
ever heard.
Oh yeah, Wayne sent me a Dropbox folder, and I've got it. And
That Run Amok stuff is
oh,
awesome.
it's so good, so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll still go back. I have a cassette player back here, like this over here in this room. Besides the weird stuff behind me, is a my turntable,
Yeah.
and there's no digital stuff. And the receiver actually does receive Bluetooth, but I never use it. Mostly just turntable, but also a cassette deck because I have some gems that are still
Well,
on
I bet you
audio
do.
cassette.
Yep,
So
I do too. I've got a box somewhere in my attic that I need to probably rescue at some point that's just all cassette tape because I know these will never be on CD, they'll never be on vinyl, and they're just rarities that, you won't be able to find anywhere else. I'm going to have to at some point get those digitized and put them on a file somewhere so that, after my demise, they will be available to whoever in my family wants them. But do you have
well,
any
I
of those
had
old demos? Do you have any of those old demos from the songs we recorded from Billy?
I believe I do somewhere
Oh
in a box
man,
back here.
I would
I
love, love, love to have copies of
there's some
those.
diamonds in there that are
Yeah,
amazing. But
yeah,
I had put the word out to the publishers in Nashville that hey, we're looking for songs for this new group. Four guys. Don't think quartet. Think pop. Think current radio. I probably had pitched some. I can't remember. I'm sure I pitched some like mainstream artists that hey, we're aiming in that direction and I remember the day Dan Keene. Of course, when Dan walks in your office, it's gets your attention because he was about
yeah,
6'4" or something,
yeah,
big tall guy, and he walks in and with his hair, I think he was about 6'7",
yep, yep.
and he sits down in
Always
my
wore jeans
office.
and a sport coat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Always. And
always.
so he sits down in my office and we're talking about the group. And he says, well, I brought a song that I think might be interesting. And I popped, stereo right behind me. I popped in the cassette deck, listened to it. My eyes got big and I go, man, that's a hit. He goes, I know. And he said, can you believe Amy passed on it? I was like, well, I mean, everybody pitches her great song. I mean, and
Yeah,
she's a brilliant writer on her own.
yeah,
You know, I don't know what the percentage of outside songs that Amy records, over the history of her work, but it has to be pretty spectacular. And this song was, and I said, that's a hit, And he goes, I know, right? And so I don't know. You guys were coming through town. I can't remember. Truth was coming through, and we were sitting. We'd had some booked some time to have a song meeting, and I remember playing it. We listened to I don't know. We probably listened to 8 or 10 songs that day,
yeah, yeah,
and the hard part for me was like everybody was pitching songs. Like, let me narrow this down to something that one fits. Each one of you had to have what songs
yeah.
for your lead.
Well, and here's the
Uh,
thing: even though we had been in Truth for 3 years before that, Mark a little bit longer, and Kirk even longer, we were never part of song pitching meetings. Roger always did that on his
but that
own,
was
and
Stevie.
so it was really cool, but also really terrifying to say, "Oh, we've got to pick the songs for the record." And again, that's where someone like you comes along to be a big brother to us to say, I know what I'm doing. Trust me." And we're gonna find some big hits here. And I got to tell you, man, I mean, let's just say Where There's Faith didn't make the record. I mean, we still would have had some hits with Couldn't We Stand and He Will Be
Yeah.
There for You.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe another song off that record would have done well. But man, nothing I don't think could have replaced the just the momentum that Where There Is Faith had on radio and establishing us as a group to listen to for decades to come.
Well, I think I even said something along those lines in that meeting when I played that song because there's it's not competing interests is not the word, but Mark's a great writer. We
But he
knew
wasn't
that he
yet.
had
But he
skills.
wasn't yet. I
He
mean,
was going to get there
he
though.
was going to get there, and there were flashes of brilliance already, but
Yeah,
we weren't going to be able to count on him to write the record yet.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so I remember playing that song, and everyone's like, "Hmm." It wasn't the reaction I expected
yeah,
because I'm like fired up. I'm like, "This is a hit. We got to record this." And I'm like, "Wow, I'm getting sort of a lukewarm reception to
yeah,
this song." And
yeah.
maybe it was the demo because it was very specific to Billy,
It
right?
was, it was, and that's what you got with his demos was you had to be able to. And that's one thing we learned was to be able to look past the demo to go, oh, this could be something totally different, and we hear the bones of it. I
Mm-hmm.
honestly, later on, Mark and Don would create these huge production demos like the song's already produced, and I'd be like, stop producing this demo so much because now I feel like we're locked into a sound and where the song could go. I just love the old days of hearing, a song by Jeff Thurman or, Sue Smith or, even one of Don's little demos to where
Yeah.
you could dream and go, what else could we do with this song? But when it's produced all the way out, you kind of go. So I think that's another thing that probably did. You're right. It made us shy away from the song because it was such a specific production of what Billy had in his head. I also remember a comment of, I don't know which one of us said it, but it felt like it was very British, like it had a very European flavor to it.
It was like Tears for Fears meets, you know, Howard Jones,
Yeah,
the
which
demo
which
for
is
me.
crazy because I'm a massive fan of Tears for Fears. And looking back on it now, I go, yeah, that totally makes sense. But coming from the Truth World, which was so choral,
Yeah.
very right down the middle, it was left of center, and
Yeah.
we were like, do
Yeah.
we want to do something that left of center for our first thing to come out? Anyway, I'm
I think I,
hijacking
I
the
think I
story
finally
here.
said, "Listen, guys, this is a hit, and you're going to do
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
it."
you played your A&R card and just went,
Yeah.
I get the final say on this song, and I think that's the only song that you really like forced your hand on. The rest of it was all done in collaboration.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we thought the chorus was too long.
Yeah.
We're just like we don't get the payoff as soon enough, and that was a big thing for radio that we sort of understood. But yeah, again, without you guiding the ship there, without really fighting for that song, I don't know that we would be where we are today.
Well, the I think God's hand was on you guys regardless, and I was happy to play a part. I think the other often I always think about the other song that I brought to you guys. This is a great story. This is actually I was talking to a buddy of mine was in Christian radio for years and years and years. Mike Fernandez. I don't know if you remember Mike.
Hmm.
Wonderful guy. Mike lives here in Atlanta. We talk once a month or so. Just a great guy, funny guy, biggest Monkees fan you'll ever meet.
Oh wow,
And yeah,
you don't meet many of them.
and yes, and we were talking about this story. I don't know, a month or two ago when I you guys were in the room and I played you. I was thinking about what would be song for Kirk, you
Yeah,
know, because all of you had fairly specific
we did.
lanes musically,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
finding songs that fit each one of you to do a lead was
Yeah.
an important part of planning a For Him album. And I played you guys that Paul Davis song "Do Right,"
Oh,
and I don't know, I just always
you're
loved that
you're
song.
gonna you're gonna you're just gonna massage my heart here with that song.
Well, I love that song, and I'd always heard it, thought, that's really a Christian song. It had been a big pop hit, and I'd kind of Paul Davis was a guy, he was lived in Atlanta. I just kind of had, I'm an Atlanta native. I don't know, I just felt like a connection to that. And I don't remember. I think Kirk immediately grasped it. Yeah, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
And it was never a single, but it was always a
Oh,
moment in the concerts.
yeah. It really was. I talked to Mark about that the other day. We're going to be doing some dates over the next few years. A few more dates is for him, and I'm like, I would love to bring that song back, just because I think it still has legs. It really showcases. It's a great arrangement. Maybe update some of the sounds a little bit. But if I'm going to put on that first for him record, that's one of the songs I'm really looking forward to.
Well, and Kirk goes, I know that and like
Yeah,
the opening lines, like,
yeah.
yes, perfect song for Kirk.
And
It
you know,
was
and you know, we changed
perfect.
the lyric on that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
because of our theological issue with um, you've got to do right, uh, if because you got to do right, and he'll be your guiding light. If you
yeah.
do right, he'll be
Yeah.
your guiding light. And we're like, no, you don't. Sin's paid for. God's
Yeah.
God's grace is on us. So we changed that lyric, which we probably shouldn't have in hindsight.
Well, here's the thing that I
But
don't know if did you know this, or did I talk to you about this when we saw each other last month?
I don't
That
know.
Paul Davis called me.
No.
Of course, the way this works for people who don't know who are listening to the podcast, a song that's been commercially recorded and released, you don't have to get permission to record it. It's what's it called? It's the compulsory license, right?
Okay.
If it's been commercially released, then anybody else can record it. You have to pay the publisher and the
Right.
writer.
Right.
So we send, hey, we're recording Do Right. We send it to the publisher. Get the compulsory license. So they know that we owe you money. So I'm sitting in my office, maybe about the time the record's coming out, and I answer my desk phone. Andy Ivey, hey man, this is Paul Davis. So,
Oh, oh
hey,
man.
hey, how you doing? He goes, I just want to thank you for recording my song. This is a real blessing to me. I appreciate it.
Wow.
You don't get those kind of phone
Wow.
calls. He was the nicest guy,
Oh,
and just thanked me for thinking about that song and giving it more life. And I told him, I said, well, I'm an Atlanta native. I kind of resonate with you. And oh, that's so cool. And he ended up passing away not just a few years later. But
yeah.
I just sometimes I think about that was one of the nicest things
Hmm.
to me was for
I
Paul Davis to pick up the phone and make a point of calling me to thank him.
such a string of hits in the late 70s and early 80s. And if
Mm-hmm.
people listening to this don't know Paul Davis's music, just go on your favorite streaming platform and start playing, a Cool Night
Yep.
and oh, what's the big love song? Shoot.
I have to
Anyway,
Google it now. I'm trying
yeah,
to remember
but
his
yeah, he's
catalog.
got three or four that are just like
Yeah.
standard radio hits, and especially
Yeah.
on Yacht Rock too. Yacht Rock plays a lot of Paul
Oh,
Davis.
big time yacht rock. And I mean,
Hmm.
everything had that percussive road sound from the late
Yeah,
70s, early 80s that, was
yeah.
just on every hit. But Paul was a super nice guy. But yeah, that was kind of that thing where for me, as we approached For Him Records, was thinking, how do we make sure everybody has their moment to shine musically,
Hmm.
lyrically? Because, the whole uh, thing was, it's one thing to think about producing an album that's cohesive, it sounds good, it has radio hits, but also to think about how does it all come across live?
Yeah,
That's your bread and butter. You guys were probably playing 3 nights a week at
yeah,
times,
or more. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
yeah, and how do we build up quickly a catalog of songs for
Hmm.
you guys to sustain the concert ministry
Yeah.
as we
Well, and you were in a unique position too to help us navigate this. Is that I'm trying to think of another group that came before us where every member of the group got an equal share of the vocal on the record. And I struggle to find out or to remember a group like that. The Imperials weren't like that really. It was mostly
Mm-mm.
Russ or, later on, Paul Smith or Tom
Yeah,
Hemby or whoever was kind of that main,
yeah,
just
Ron, it
really
was Ron Hemby.
gritty. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Ron Hemby, sorry.
yeah.
And, uh, I don't know that was kind of a unique position to put you in as well to go, well, we've got to represent. That was one of our stipulations because we would sit down and go, okay, we got 9 songs on that first record. Everybody gets 2 leads, and then we do one all skate. And then that was the same way for most every record after
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
everyone's going to get at least 2 big moments on a record. And we're not guaranteed singles, those songs to be singles, but we're going to try and find the songs that fit each personality. And I think that was one of the beauties of For Him and, really made us unique on the landscape of radio and, that you could have an
Yeah.
interesting concert every time you came to see us.
Well, and you said it actually got easier, because when that first album came out and Where There's Faith was a number one hit, and everybody's like, what? You know, then when we began to talk about the next record, every publisher wanted a piece of that,
Yep, that's
right?
right.
And then we started getting people's A stuff. I mean, God bless Dan King for bringing us an
Yeah.
A number one song on a group no one had ever heard of.
But where did we go for the first big single on record number 2? Right back to
Oh,
Billy Simon.
oh, that's right, that's right,
Right
that's
back to
right,
Billy
Billy.
Simon. The
That's
first
right,
single
we
was "A Man
did.
You'd Write About," and that was one of his.
Yeah,
We were like, Billy, what else you got? And I think we did at least 2, maybe 3 of Billy's songs on that record. I know "Puzzles"
yeah,
was
puzzles.
on that record.
Man you would write about. I always loved the man you
Uh-huh.
would write about, just because, um, so many Christian songs have been written about walking out your faith in a genuine way,
Hmm.
or even it's like the whole when did the WWJD thing hit?
Yeah.
It's like that's at its core. I want to be a man that you think about the heroes of the Bible. and why their story is in there, right? And some of them are like, whoa, that's a crazy story. But it all has its place in the formation, spiritual formation of our lives, right? And Billy hit it on the nose of, I want to live my life in such a way that people would write about my kingdom life,
Hmm.
not my fame, not my fortune, not
Yeah.
my whatever. And I loved that. I loved it for the lyric. I mean, Billy always has beautiful melodies and quirky melodies, like we were saying. But man, that was just so spot on. It's like, oh, and convicting at
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
but true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, Chisel Meets the Stone, or was that on?
that was it.
Yeah, is that on the third,
Yeah,
on the second record?
I believe that second record too. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we went back to that well pretty hard for the second
Yeah.
record.
Oh, that's because it was
Um,
Chris Harris. Chris Harris produced that one.
yeah,
So I actually sang. Yeah, I didn't sing a lead with Dawn on album number two. I sang a lead that because Reed Arvin produced.
mhm.
And we can talk about that here in a minute, how we chose producers for this
Yeah,
project. And there's some pretty good producer stories I want to get to. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I worked Reed Arvin with Man You'd Write About, and then I did puzzles um, and Chisel Meets a Stone with Chris, I believe, with Chris Harris.
yeah. That was Chris.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So let's talk about that for a second. How the choosing of producers, was always a negotiation. I
yeah,
think that, we wanted our wish list was some heavy hitters on album number one, and we came to you with Chris Harris and Mark Heimerman
yeah.
because we were such big fans of those Prism albums. Even though they
Mhm.
were kids' records, we were like, this is really pop sounding. It's
That
very
was really
current
high
sounding.
end children record production. It
Yes.
was not, it was very sophisticated, and you could hear the pop sensibilities that
Yeah.
Chris and Mark always brought to the table. Mark still does. Well, Chris and Mark both still do really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of keep an eye on both of them and remain friend. I'm more in contact with Mark these days than I am Chris,
Yeah.
but yeah,
And that was
super
just
super
this was
talented
pre,
dudes.
for Mark Heimerman, it was pre DC Talk days.
Yeah, yeah,
So we were still kind of getting him before he got massive and huge. And then
yeah,
that second record, he was out. We wanted them both back.
yeah,
And Chris was like, well, I'll do it. But Mark was like, I'm going to go on and do some other things over here. And he
yeah,
knew where he was going with
yeah.
that. Don was someone that my memory is we didn't really know Don. And I just remember saying, "Hey, you saying, hey, we've got this new producer. He's been writing songs for us for a long time. I know he had produced a few things before the For Him record, but it was kind of his first,
I don't
one
think
of
Don
his
had
first.
produced anything that actually was commercially released before that first For Him
Yeah.
album. I don't think.
Well, I talked to him not long ago before he
Hey,
passed, and he did mention that he had produced a couple other things before that first For Him record, but no, not the big commercial success
yeah,
that he had
yeah.
with us.
I had worked with Don a lot, and we just become friends. I mean, I hung out with him a lot. We kind of showed up at Benson at the same time, and had interesting life stories, uh, and just we played a lot of golf together, and I I just I just believed in his gifting a lot, not just his songwriting, but I would hear his demos,
Yeah.
and he would come hang out in my office a lot, like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I just kept hearing like this guy is way more than only a songwriter. Which don't get me wrong, being a songwriter is a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm not downplaying the importance of songwriters. I mean, talk Natalie Hemby for a second or people like
Right.
that that are
Yeah.
these days just killing it. But the the style that Don just lived in was great. And I thought, man, he needs a break. And I had just gotten a break. I wanted to be in A&R and production, and I got a
Hmm.
break. I mean,
Yeah.
Jerry Park gave me. He says, "All right, I'm going to give you this. Prove to me that you got something." Okay. And I felt like I should do the same thing for Don because I loved him. I believed in his gift. Um, and I knew that he was heading for big stuff.
Yeah.
And I just like, we got to bring Don into this. And I knew that he would bring Don as producer also brings in songs, songwriting, other songwriters that that we would need in the long run. And so we just always kind of said, let's a lot of people go one producer, whole album, get it done. Like, you know what? We got these four guys who are really um, who sing well as a unit, but also have very I mean, your voice and and uh, Mark, very different, completely different musical genre, really. Kirk's just Kirk. Kirk never sings anything the same way
No, he
twice.
doesn't. Trust me.
Ever,
Trust me. I've toured with him.
ever.
Yeah.
I know. But every time it's always good.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like it's different, but dang, that was good too.
Yeah.
And Marty, sometimes I don't even know how to describe.
We called him the
Well,
freak.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so finding producers that could work with four really different kind of lead vocalists just took some effort. But I think it paid off in the long run. And also you guys got exposed to different production styles, so you figure out what do you like? How do you resonate with it? Because you know that when you're locked in a studio with somebody for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, you
Mm-hmm.
better be able to get along with it. I
Oh yeah.
mean, and of course you and I had the interesting experience of the world of Jonathan David Brown.
Well, I wanted to bring him up, and I wasn't
Yeah,
sure kind of how to navigate the process,
yeah.
but you were, you would tell us. I just remember some of the stories. Now, obviously, we were there recording with him, and look, we did, and we've told this on a couple of podcasts that I think we were in town for 9 or 10 days
It was
to put our
phenomenal.
to put our vocals on the record. And that was it.
Yeah.
We weren't there for tracking. We weren't there for mixing because we were out with Truth every day.
Yeah. So I'm there the whole time hearing it
Yeah,
all going, is this going to work? And I was
yeah,
nervous because
yeah.
I'm
So
like, it's on me
sure,
to make sure that this is right for
yeah. And so being at Jonathan David's place, and if you don't know who Jonathan David Brown is,
you.
man,
Twyla
legendary
Paris,
producer. Twyla Paris, Petra.
Petra,
Um, oh
gosh, I
man,
don't know, everything. He had his hand in
yeah,
a lot of stuff.
yeah. But he got in a little bit of trouble,
Yeah.
a little bit of legal trouble. I don't want to. Again, I don't want to go down that road. Feel free to Google his name. I don't
Yeah.
know what's out there, but it was kind of obvious to us in his home, and it wasn't. And let me just say, it wasn't anything sexual or anything like that.
No, no,
But
no, no,
no, no,
no.
no,
But
no. But just seeing some things around his home, we were like, yeah,
I'm
this
sure
is
somewhere there was a supply of like 2 years of prepackaged food in his home
yes,
somewhere.
yeah,
I suspect that there was.
yeah,
Um, I I had heard Jonathan, I had never used him before, but of
mhm,
course I knew who he was, heard tons of his stuff, and he pitched me. He heard about you guys and
huh?
he pitched me, said, hey, I'd like to be a part of that. I'm like, dang, this guy's got a long track history
Yes, he
of
does.
producing out stuff that gets on the radio. And I was like, of course, I didn't know much about him other than his history. And I thought, well, I think we should give it a shot. And it's like low risk, three songs. Okay, let's do it. But I remember sitting in the basement at Jonathan's house, listening to him, and there he'd be on the MPC 60 over there programming like crazy, and it would be awesome.
Yeah,
But you could tell like this dude, his brain worked differently than all of everybody else, anybody I've ever known. Um, Musically gifted, but also kind of those sometimes those musically gifted people can be some of those eccentric people you'll
yes. Okay,
ever
eccentric's a good
rub
word.
shoulders with. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was eccentric.
Yeah, we can kind of leave
Uh,
it at that.
yeah,
And then okay, so again, not to dwell on this, but I just think some of these stories are fascinating. That I remember a story about when, like, you know, there was some things happened at his home,
yeah,
and um, and things were about to get confiscated from his home.
yeah.
And do I have this story right that you made you somehow you got in there and got masters like
I got all the 2-inch masters and brought them back to Benson before anything happened. I somebody called me and said, "Dude, you guys got some assets over there. I would suggest you go get them now." And
and,
so I went over there and got them.
and it wasn't just ours.
No, no, it was other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it was tons of like of masters for some big artists and big albums that were just
Yeah,
in his basement.
in his basement,
Yeah. And I
which is
remember
not a great way to store analog tape
yeah.
anyway. Which
Yeah.
there's all sorts of stories about that. Um, you know, so okay. Do you know what the first gold album in Christian music ever was?
Hmm. Was it Benny Hester?
Dallas Home, Rise Again,
Really?
or that's a live album with Rise Again on it.
Oh
Because Rise
man,
Again was such a
that's
huge
part of my
song.
heritage. Yeah.
Exactly. And
One of
Dallas, I worked with Dallas for many years.
the.
Love that man so much. Just, I never met a more genuine Jesus follower than
Mhm.
Dallas Home.
I would agree.
So quick off for him tangent story. So
Okay.
at some point, we Benson owned the masters that Rise Again album. We thought, and I think as the digital age coming to CDs, like that album deserves a remix, remastering, put it on CD. So I went down to the vault at Benson, got the 2-inch masters for that album. And Brett Teagarden,
Oh yeah.
recording engineer, brilliant guy.
Hmm.
I said, let's get Brett to remix it. He had connection to Dallas. I talked to Dallas about it, and so yeah, I got the 2-inch master, gave him to Brett, said, hey, let's start working on a remix. Stay true to the album. It's a live album. You don't get crazy with it, but let's remix it, remaster it. And I remember the first day he's doing that, he calls me up, says, we have a problem. I said, what? He goes, the way you store analog tape, it needs to be climate controlled. And the vault at Benson was not climate
Oh
controlled.
no.
Humid, cold, hot, depending on, it's Nashville. It's hot, cold, it's everything. He says, I put that 2-inch master on my machine. And the moment I started, he says, emulsion started flaking off. I'm like, oh,
Oh
this is
no.
this is Christian music history, first gold album ever.
Yeah.
We go, what are we gonna do? So I remember I said, well, Brett, I think let's call Ampex, which is the manufacturer of the tape. Like, what do we do? And so he called me back and says, you're not going to believe what they told me to do. They told me to put it in my kitchen oven at 250 for about 4 hours
No way.
and then take it out. And he goes, do we do that? I mean, what? I'm like, we could be destroying the actual masters of the first gold album ever in Christian music. I'm like, this is Ampex. He goes, they assured me this is how you do it and it'll be fine. I'm like, okay, we did it and it turned out great. And
Wow.
and then we remixed it and mashed it. And that's where the CD for the Dallas Home and Praise live album came from. But we had to bake the tape. And
Wow.
Brett was nervous. I was nervous. Like we could, both be in serious trouble if this
Man.
goes wrong. But
I
yeah.
I remember Don was a puncher. Like Don loved to punch in
Oh yes.
vocals, whereas someone like Michael Amardian was more of a comper. So you would,
Yeah.
he would just
Record them and fly them together.
record you 30 times and then fly it all together and
Yeah.
make magic out of it. Don was adamant. I can hear a comp vocal a mile away. I want to punch. He wants the breaths to line up and he wants the emotion to line up from
Mm-hmm.
line to line.
Yeah.
But at some point, especially if you're not on your game, that tape starts to wear out. You can't punch it forever,
No.
and tape starts to wear out. And I just remember many of those times, Don going, guys, we've got about 3 more times to get this because we're going to put a hole in the tape. And
Yeah.
it's not like digital where you can do it a limitless number of times and fix everything. You had a certain amount of time to get it. You had to sing it right because tuning of the vocals, and it was. I mean, you had to know your stuff, and
Dude, before Pro Tools and digital recording came out, I mean, that whole analog process, I mean, I can't tell you how many times me sitting there on the tape machine with the little tray and a razor blade,
yeah,
I would physically cut the tape and then assemble it back together, take out a verse or take out this thing, to shorten it for for a single or whatever. The things we did with analog tape would freak out people who grew up in the digital recording age. It's
yeah.
just a whole different universe.
But how
Uh,
much better? I mean, I know we're old school saying this, but how much better does analog sound than digital sometimes? Just feels like there's a depth to it, there's a warmth to it that
there
digital
is a
has
warmth.
caught up. But I remember back in the day hearing, I think was the first all digitally recorded, mixed, and mastered album ever was Sting's. Um, it was his second record, and what wasn't Dream of the Blue Turtles? It was nothing, maybe nothing like the sun.
Yes,
Probably.
yes, I think so.
Yeah, and I even remember back then. So that was like late '80s, probably late 80s, early 90s, late 80s. And I remember I can hear a difference and I liked it, but then you get back and go, oh man, just all the I don't know. It's almost like handcrafted furniture as opposed to something made by machine. I don't know.
I
Uh,
remember the first all digital studio in Nashville, Soundstage. Was that one of the Soundstage one, two, or three? I can't remember which one it was. They had a Mitsubishi 32 track digital machine and an SSL console in it. And I remember this is like Randy Travis era, and later than that. But I was talking to a buddy of mine who worked for Warner Brothers Country, and they were talking about, hey, we recorded everything and mixed it on that SSL and the third, and just sound. They said it sounds harsh.
hmm.
And then you go to somebody like Hank Williams at Master Mix, and then Hank's, he puts the polish on it. It makes it sound like it was, better. And Hank was great at that. One of the best mastering engineers I've ever seen. I think Hank mastered almost all of your records as well,
Yes, he
if
did.
I remember
Hmm.
correctly.
Well, he was the guy. I would guess 90% of all the mastering in Nashville during that time went
Yeah,
through Hank Williams.
you went through Hank and Master
Yeah.
Mix,
Hmm.
which was always an interesting process. I remember the first time I did that, I was like, this is a cool thing. It's like waxing your car, right?
Yeah.
You put the final shine on it and you think the paint is perfect, and then it gets this wax, it's like, oh, that looks great. Same thing with mastering. It's like, sounds really good, we're happy with the mix, blah blah blah. And then you go in Hank and he like, you need a little more at about 450 hertz here, like, who can hear that? But when he adds it and then he compresses everything in the right way, it's like, dang, that's really good. I mean, yeah, now I see why you get paid to do this stuff, Hank. um, yeah, a good mastering engineer, um, is well worth the
Yeah.
investment.
That's right. That's right. What was the last record you A&R'd for us?
Christmas
Um,
album,
was the Christmas album? And
Christmas album,
that one just
which has a great
continues to be
story.
okay. Bring it. Bring your story.
So every year at Christmas, I mean, since I've been old enough to make my own Christmas music decisions, the very first album I listen to every year is Nat King Cole's Christmas album.
Yeah.
That is my favorite Christmas
One
album.
of my favorites
I
as well.
love it. I start there, and I'm like, I refuse to listen to anything else until I've heard Nat King Cole Christmas. And so when we began talking about the Christmas album, I'm like, I think I talked to you guys first. I'm like, dude, let's get Ralph Carmichael. And it goes, he did Nat King Cole, he did Bing Crosby. I mean, amongst a
Oh yeah.
million other legendary
Legendary.
orchestral arrangements, the guy was just legend, right? And of course, was it Light Records, one of the Christian?
Hmm.
He
Yep.
started like one of the first Christian
Yep.
labels out in California. And I thought, let's get him in here. I remember he came, he was in Nashville, he came, he sat down in my office there that you sat in a million times, and he started telling me stories. And I was like, and I told him, I don't know, man, I think he had, when I told him I was interested, he went and listened to some For Him stuff. He goes, those guys are really good. I said, yeah, they are. And I said, we don't want to do it, it's not an all orchestral traditional Christmas album, but some of it we would love to go there. And he started telling stories about Nat King Cole. And here I am, just I had always Nat King Cole's one of my, not just Christmas artists, but just an artist. I totally love his voice and everything. And I think about what he endured to be successful in his time. And I just admired him. And Ralph just sat there telling me actually what a fine human being, Nat King Cole was. And that was just, I was like, I'm sitting here going, the guy who did all the orchestrations for Nat King
Yeah.
Cole and Bing
Yeah.
Crosby. I mean, a lot of people think Bing Crosby's White Christmas is, I mean, that's legendary, right? Ralph did that too. He did all the orchestrations. And it just, that was for me, like, that was high point.
Yeah.
Sit in an office with Ralph Carmichael and talk about orchestrating, albums that I'd heard since I was old enough to recognize music, honestly. And I know you guys had a great time.
We did. We've told this story several times about that Christmas album. That's it's one of the things I really wanted to talk to Don about on the podcast that I did with him is just how that was the only album that Don did front to back for us
Yeah.
as a full producer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say that was my idea, but I feel like I was one of the first ones to say, "Hey, what if Don produced the whole thing?"
I think I do recall that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember going because we had a short amount of time to do it, and with specialty records, What was the other term? Not there's another term for it.
Seasonal record.
Yeah, a seasonal
For a seasonal
record.
record,
Yeah.
you got to have a really limited window to get it sold, to
Hmm.
get it in there, and then
Right.
and then it's basically nobody cares about a Christmas album after after Christmas Day that
Right.
year, and then next about October,
Yeah.
you can give it another push,
Yeah.
and try it again.
But we knew Don could get it done quickly, and we had done enough work with him with all of our producers. We didn't want to use somebody new, and to do multiple producers just sounded like it wasn't going to work for this record. And so I think it was just the perfect combination of Don overseeing the whole thing and producing it, writing a few songs for it, and then Ralph coming in. And again, what I've told on the podcast before was just being at Great Circle when Ralph was they were laying down the orchestration for what I think it was five or six of the 10 songs that he put
Yeah,
orchestration
I think
on.
it was,
Probably all we could
yeah,
afford for him to
yeah.
do.
It wasn't
Uh,
cheap, and it
no,
wasn't cheap to have 100 orchestra players out there on the floor either.
no, but I'm telling you, Timeless album, I get messages every single season
It's a beautiful
from
Christmas
people just
album.
saying it is part of our family's tradition, thousands and thousands of people. But I just remember hearing his arrangements going, oh no, we have to lay vocals. What are we gonna do? Like it was so intricate and all these crazy things he was doing. I'm like, how are we gonna sing into this? Because we weren't just block singers. We weren't just gonna sing block chords
Mm-mm.
over everything. We were intricate singers as well, developing our own sound, doing these
Mm-hmm.
weird harmonies and overlays and
Yeah.
all these things coming in and out. And to me, it was terrifying and exciting at the same time. And that's the most fun I think I've ever had on a record was number one, being under the gun and the clock ticking because we had to get back out on the road. And then just going, how are we going to fit our vocals into what Ralph just did? And I think that's what makes that record such a beautiful record is because it all worked. It all worked together.
And Christmas albums were always a little tricky picking the songs because you're like, okay, some people are like me. If I buy a Christmas album, I honestly want it to be mostly songs that I already know. Not and not to discount there are every year or two I'll hear a new Christmas song. Oh, I like that. But for me, I know I'm super biased, but I think Strange Way to Save the World is deeply underrated.
Oh, yeah.
I love that song.
Hmm.
I love the idea of it. I love the execution of it. Um, and weird part is I find myself playing it for people almost every year, going, "Have you ever heard this?" And they go, "Wow, that's great." I'm going, "Yeah, everybody should have heard this." I mean, for me, that was a little bit of a frustration. It's like, why is that song not more known?
Yeah.
Because it is Mark. It was Mark Don Dave, wasn't it?
And I think it's just Mark and
Mark
Don.
and
I would have to go back and look at the credits.
I
Dave
can't
might have been on
remember.
that. I wouldn't be
Yeah, I can't
surprised if
remember.
Dave was on it. Well,
Just amazing song.
yeah, yeah, and that was kind of one of the last ones to kind of come in for the song selection process when we were collecting songs for the album,
Mhm.
and that the way it always happens. It's kind of the last one to the table that ends
Yeah.
up being
And everybody
the
goes, "Oh, we got to do that."
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
one thing, Andy, that I really appreciate about those early days of Benson, and it all changed, I think because once we hired Mike Atkins as a manager, we didn't have a manager for
yeah,
those first few years and those first few albums, which is nuts on our part. But also, there was something beautiful about it because it felt like family. I mean, you were like family to us, Dennis Disney, Dan Lynch, even Jerry Park,
yeah,
for the limited amount of time we got to spend around him. It felt like family and that we were doing things like a family and like friends. And obviously, there was a business aspect to it. And you guys needed to make money and we wanted to make royalties and there's
yeah,
negotiations and all that kind of stuff in there. You bring a manager in and the manager goes, hey, you don't need to be friends with the label. You need me in the middle. And, but, I just remember there were a lot of times at your house just hanging out. There were a lot of just hanging out at dinner and, just going to movies together. And you would come out on the road and hang out with us. And that's what, I think all artists that I talk to when they talk about the great A&R people that worked with them, they have that. They have that sort of relationship where it feels like we're on the same team, not just same team, but the same family, just cheering each other on to great things. Even though, look, we're benefiting financially from the relationship, there is something that we go to war together to make these records and to get these things done. And I mean, even the fact that I'm looking right now at the debut album cover, and we're wearing your clothes.
No. Well, Mark and Kirk were kind of my size, and I think, and
Yeah.
yeah, I was laughing about that. Everyone else would go, "Oh yeah, that's my sweater, or that's my coat. That brown leather jacket that Kirk wore, that's mine." That
Uh,
you
yeah,
know,
I think I can remember putting that sweater vest on, or that kind of sweater vest, and I remember it being about at least one size too big,
yeah.
and so that's why most of it's cropped out. But I just look at that and go, yeah, I don't remember any of those clothes, just buying them or ever wearing them again, because we worked on such a shoestring budget. I feel like that we made that record for around $30,000.
No. The first record we made, this is how the budget. We spent 45,000 on the first record.
Okay,
We spent 60 on the second record, and
okay,
then basics we had 100.
yeah, I know it kept going up well because we're selling more.
Yeah, selling more.
And,
Jerry go,
and
but one time it was about. I think Jerry Park and I were really good friends. We played golf together often a Saturday morning. We worked together all week, and then Saturday morning we're at Forest Crossing Golf Course in Franklin playing golf together.
yep,
And I remember one time, and so Jerry and I were, I count Jerry as a friend of mine. Even then, he was, older than me, but believed in me, and I thanked him. But one time, he called me in his office. Oh great, I'm getting called into the CEO's office, and he goes, "Do I need to remind you that your paycheck is from Benson, not from 4M?" And it's like, he goes, "I know you're close to those guys, but you work for us, and that does reflect the fact that, I counted all four of you guys as dear friends of mine, and I wanted you to succeed. I wanted you to succeed so much, that I just, you know, I, more than once I was accused of, like, are you keeping the best interests of your employer? I said, well, I said, look, here's the thing. If For Him succeeds, we will succeed.
that's right.
And that's how we have to look at it. If we make sure those guys are super successful, the Mike Gay and all the salespeople are going to be really happy because they're going to be selling a bunch of copies.
That's
And
right.
I said, that's what we want.
That's right.
I want their royalties to grow because that means we're selling more.
Yeah.
And so, it was an interesting. It's always an interesting balance. And uh, in Nashville, it's sort of like, there's many drummer jokes as there are A&R guy jokes. And
I love
and I
drummer
have,
jokes.
yeah,
Bass player
oh,
jokes. Bass player
yeah,
jokes are even funnier.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
just pick your poison. There's a joke, and uh, but I always felt like, I wanted to work with my friends. And Dallas Holm was one of the kindest people, and his wife Linda, who recently passed.
Yeah.
Linda was always so kind to me, and Dallas as well always was. Um, Matthew Ward was one of the most unusual people I ever
Hmm.
heard. He also lived out there in Lindale, Texas.
Yeah.
Loved Matthew, funny guy, and but I worked with people that I really enjoyed being around. Al Denson was a circus wherever he went,
Oh yeah.
but it was
Still
fun.
is. Yeah.
Still is, but it was fun. And he just had that, when he'd make some outlandish proposal and he'd have that smile on his face, like, okay, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And the guy just, he's the consummate deal maker and made things work. And it was interesting. I enjoyed hanging out with Al. Billy and Sarah Gaines to this day. Billy
Hmm.
Gaines is one of my closest friends.
Wonderful. Wonderful
I
guy.
I spend a lot of time with. But I probably, when I was a single man living in Nashville, I've made more meals at the Gaines dinner table than anywhere else.
Hmm.
And I still, Billy and I talk. I don't know, once every couple of months. One of us will call the other and check in. Or when I get to Nashville, I try to always see Billy. Billy Gaines is one of those people, like, has spoken into my life in really meaningful ways over the years. So yeah, I got to work with a lot of people that, I genuinely loved, and it just so happened that commerce brought us together, but it
Yeah.
really worked well.
Let's talk about your exit from Nashville and the music
Yeah.
industry and Benson especially. Can you kind of walk us through that? And because I think, one of the really great I think attributes of this podcast is everybody I talk to is they're older, 50s, 60s, 70s years old, and the heyday of their Christian music career is way back in the rearview mirror, but God continued to use them. They kept finding the next thing God wanted them to do. And I think that's the fear of every artist or anyone that works in the music industry is, well, what if I get cut? What if I lose my job? What if nobody wants to hire me as a
Yeah.
musician or an industry person anymore? What do I do now? And I think that's probably the case for anybody in any walk of life. What happens if this I don't get to do this anymore? Is there something else for me to do that I'm going to love?
Well, you I'll try to tell the story as quickly as I can. I grew up in a family that, my dad was a Delta pilot, and but my dad was, that was what he did to make a living and take care of his family. He was a minister and a, ministry leader. He started a ministry called Fellowship of Christian Airline Personnel, which is a workplace evangelism and discipleship ministry, still thriving to this day. And the church that my oldest sister and her husband and family, where we all went to, started in our home in 1971.
Wow.
And when we would between pastors, it would, dad would pastor the church. He was just a minister who had a, regular gig, right? And so I grew up with that sort of ministry example being set for me and for all four of us. I'm the youngest of four. Um, and you and I, the guys and I, we went to the Dominican Republic with Compassion International, and
Right.
I had that experience together. And I had kind of, my oldest sister and her husband had lived in the DR for 2 years as medical missionaries, and so I had an affinity for it. And I came back going, wow, Compassion really does what they say they do, and it's really cool and it's beautiful. Um, and then about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after that trip, a couple of guys, you remember Tom Beard, who played
Oh yeah.
keyboards
Mm-hmm.
for Glad,
Yep.
just one of the most beautiful souls. Um, he and another guy came to my office in Nashville one day. They said, because I told them, hey, I'd really like to volunteer for you guys and help you out, whatever I could do. And they said, we don't want you to volunteer for us. We'd like you to consider coming to work for Compassion. And it's like, okay. And so, as anybody who's watching this podcast, see, I'm a pretty big outdoorsman. It's like, I grew up that way in the country. And I thought to myself, living in Colorado might be kind of cool. I can fly fish and, ski, and so I explored it, and it just seemed like God just kept saying, "This is you need to go, and I got some things I want to do with your life." Okay, and so I go to Compassion, move to Colorado Springs, and very quickly, what I discovered was I thought I would probably live in Nashville the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It had become my adopted hometown.
Mm-hmm.
But what I discovered was that God had a whole different career track ministry for me. And what I discovered was I love raising money to fund the kingdom. And uh, I got to have a really broad experience with Compassion, understanding what it is that a Christian ministry does to function and to flourish and to grow. And,
Which can I say? I mean, I
yeah,
see the parallel between what you're doing as an A&R guy and raising money for, a ministry like Compassion International. You just talked about going, hey, let's spend more money. Let's spend more money. But why? Each record, because why? Because it pushes that ministry for him even farther than we did last year or the last record. And so that feels to me like as you're telling that, man, what a great little parallel journey that was for you.
it was really good, and God really worked on my heart there. And I got mentored and got to work with people like Wes Stafford, who was the president of
Uh-huh.
Compassion at the time. It's just one of my heroes, and his personal story. For people who don't know, just look up Wes Stafford. Read his. He's got several books, but his story growing up as a missionary kid in the west coast of Africa, just an amazing story. But it just solidified in my mind that God had a different plan for me. And I've followed that journey pretty much ever since. Today I work for an organization called Honduras Outreach, and we own a ranch in Honduras. It's a couple thousand acres. But from that base, we just demonstrate the love of Jesus to the most, you know what it is. It's the poorest of the poor, but also some of the most beautiful human beings you'll ever experience. And so I kind of run the U.S. operations and help find the funding for this beautiful ministry that uh, just does very significant things in the lives of people. We provide basically the primary health care for last year we served 25,000 people. We have
Wow.
a clinic
That's
we
awesome.
own a ranch. We have a
Yeah.
clinic there, a medical clinic with a doctor who's been with us for 30 years, Dr. Herman, who's been with us for 30 years. I was there a few weeks ago and on the morning, and these people are lined up to see the doctor. And we have an orthodontist there, a dentist. We have our own pharmacy there. These people come and are we demonstrate the tangible hands and feet of Jesus to them. We have a spiritual director there. Basically, we brought Young Life to Honduras.
Oh, wow.
And so we have a great partnership with Young Life, really making a difference because, people, young men growing up in Honduras without a whole lot of potential are very easily swayed into gang life and that sort of thing. And Young Life is a great partnership for us. There's that medical component, the spiritual component. Um, we church groups come. Now you and I talked about this because I'm going to get you down there with some of these worship leaders. We do just hands and feet of Jesus. People need clean water to be
Mm.
healthy. They need um, you know sanitation facilities that provide for healthy existence. So church groups come down and build, toilets and septic tanks and, fresh water, what we call a pila, which is a place where it stores fresh water, clean water, and they can access it, there at their home. So we do that. And I realized, years ago that, maybe the skill sets that God gave me, and my degree was in marketing, right? Um, maybe what my really real calling is to, you know, uh, I like to say this, and I can't take credit for it. Another ministry fundraiser told me this. He says, "God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He just needs some cowboys to go rope them in and bring them in,
I
right?" And
like
that's
that.
kind of what I do.
Wow. Wow.
My job is to find kingdom-minded people with resources and match them to what God is doing. You've seen this. I mean, we tell this story. It's kind of funny. Everybody who's been to an airport at some point, you've like clearly a church group going on a mission trip.
Yep.
They all got their T-shirt on. It says, and I remember a friend of mine saw this. I didn't see this, but he's told the story, and I know he tells the truth. They all had a shirt on that says whatever the church was, and but it says taking Jesus to Costa Rica, and I'm like, dude, Jesus was there
He's
before
already
you,
there.
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But so what I love about what I do is that it's just joining Jesus in the mission that he's already created. That his people are already there. The Holy Spirit is already working amongst the people. And we're bringing the kingdom resources to say, okay, how do we take these people on a journey with Jesus to go, here's the tangible uh, hands and feet of Jesus working in this community. How do we join with him in that work? And so I get to do that. It's a blessing. I was like I said, I was just down there a couple of weeks ago. So one of the other things we do, we have a program called the First 1,000 Days of Life. And what we discovered in the Alancho state, which is the state where our ranch is based, is that kids just weren't getting kind of decent nutrition. You were talking about 3-year-olds that weighed 20 pounds,
Hmm.
and they weren't getting any protein, any kind of animal protein in their diet. And so we started a program called the First 1,000 Days of Life, and we built a chicken coop on the ranch. And right now we have about 400 layer birds in there.
Wow.
What happens is these kids that when
Wow.
when their mom becomes pregnant, they start getting an egg a day. Cook it any way you want it, but you get an egg a day for that. And when the kid's born, again, basically it's about a 3 year program, three
Yeah.
year plus 1,000 days, right?
Yeah.
Egg a day. And what we're finding was physical development, mental development was was tracking where it's supposed to be because of just that little addition of protein in their life, which it's a
Mm.
small thing. It's an egg, right?
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I mean, that's practical. Let's say because there's a saying. I think I heard it with you when we were in the Dominican Republic because we were did that Haitian Bate that we visited.
Right.
They were saying that there's a saying in Creole French, and I heard it in Haiti when I visited Haiti. But it's like an empty stomach has no ears for the gospel.
Mm.
And if you don't meet the real tangible physical needs, then don't tell me Jesus loves me if my child, is in terrible physical health and I can't do anything about it, but you could help
Right.
me. It's the story of the Samaritan, the Good
Mm-hmm.
Samaritan, right?
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And so I get the joy of being a part of that. And it's, you know, I turned 60 this year. I'm 60.
Wow.
Well, I
You're
remember my
old.
dad turned 60.
You're
He was
so
so old.
old.
I know. Well, it's funny, when he was with Delta Airlines, man, back then at 60,
Yeah.
every pilot had to retire.
Yeah.
He was done.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am, getting on planes and flying to Honduras and meeting some of the most beautiful people I've ever known.
Mm.
And I get to keep doing that. But I did do this. So again, dad was a Delta pilot. My brother's been a corporate pilot for forever. I decided at 59 I was getting my pilot's license. So yeah, I'm just about to finish that up. So
Okay. Well, let me
I
know.
had to
Let
had
me
to
know.
do
Come
it.
down to Tulsa.
I'll
Fly
fly to
on down
Tulsa
to
and we'll go for a
Tulsa.
ride.
We'll go for a ride. We'll go play some
Yeah,
golf and
yeah,
so if someone's listening to this and they feel the Holy Spirit encouraging them to support or give to what you're doing, what's the
yeah.
website that they can go to?
It's just HOI.org. And
HOI.org.
yeah, Honduras Outreach Inc. And founded 35 years ago by a guy who just God put this property in his lap and was like, do something with it. And a couple of founders who had big vision
Mm-hmm.
thought we could do some great things there. And so we would love for people to join with us. If you're part of a church group and you want to have a really meaningful short-term mission trip, um, we can. That's really what we're good at. Pre-pandemic, we were taking 60 church groups a year down there. We have
Wow.
dorms and the whole deal,
Yeah.
dining hall facilities and all that kind of stuff. We've got a group that leaves here in Atlanta from Atlanta on Saturday. There's about 50 people, all going just to do beautiful things in the community.
Mm.
Um, we're really good at that. So if people want to go as a church group, if they want to give support the work, um, we have that main clinic on the campus. We also have 4 of the remote health clinics, way out in the mountains. We're in this beautiful valley in the mountains of Honduras. They can give to support that work, support the work of our spiritual life growth work. We provide a lot of jobs. We have a running, operating dairy farm operation on the
Oh, that's
ranch.
cool. Wow.
Milk.
Yeah.
We raise a lot of crops that gives people jobs around the
Mm-hmm.
area. So it's just again the hands and feet of Jesus at work amongst people who lack some material resources, but as you know, are some of the kindest, most beautiful souls that God ever made. And
Mm.
so, yeah, visit HOI.org and there's a donate, page right at the top. You're welcome. We need more people to help us expand that work. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I love you, brother. And, I'm so excited about what God has you doing in this season of your life. And, I think if you're, again, if your palms up going, God, what do you want me to do? I mean, there's no end to what he can lay in front of you. And if you're willing to go and, then man, it's going to be an exciting journey. And I know we could stay on here another 2 hours and we should probably do it again sometime. We got to, you know, maybe
Yeah, we
one
scratched the
a
surface a bit.
small fraction of the stories that you have to tell, which I know my listeners they love a lot of the inside detail because
Yeah,
it's nobody's really talked about it much in
yeah. Yeah.
in these in this format. But again, I hope to see you soon. You know, it was great seeing you
Well,
at
I told you I'd come see you, and so I will, and we'll play some golf, and we'll talk about, you know, we could use some worship leaders coming to the ranch and
we're gonna
spending
do
some
it. Oh
time
yeah, I'm gonna
too.
bring the table down there at some point.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
We would love
Yeah.
that. We
Yeah.
would love that. Well, man, thank you so much. Of course, I was so thrilled to spend some time with you last month in Nashville. Even though it was losing our dear friend Don, but I think he would have been very happy I was sad that Marty wasn't there, but
Yeah.
you and Mark and Kirk and me standing there, just like kind of the old days.
Hmm.
I know that Don was happy to know that we were standing there, not only telling stories about him, but enjoying what God allowed us to do together. That's for me. That's the story.